Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this Presenter Services webinar for OLC Innovate 2020. Today, we're going to go over Presenter Reflect sessions. My name is Katie Schuster, and I am the Director of Conferences and Events for the Online Learning Consortium, and I am pleased to introduce one of our Presenter Services co-chairs today to get us started, Laura Weidner.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the webinar. Thank you so much for joining us. We have an amazing team of presenters today, so I'm going to just turn it right over to them and allow them to introduce themselves, and we will get started.
Hi, good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are today. I'm Tina Rettler-Pagel. I have the honor of serving as the OLC Innovate 2020 Conference Co-Chair with Janet Smith from the University of Arizona. And I am a full-time faculty member and serve as Madison College's Chief Online Learning Officer in Madison, Wisconsin. And I'll ask Keegan and Taylor, my co-presenters, to introduce themselves.
Hello, my name is Keegan Longwheeler, and I am serving as the program co-chair for this year's Innovate. I work as an educational technologist at the University of Oklahoma.
Hey there, everybody. Taylor Kendal, serving as engagement co-chair for Innovate 2020. I also work as the chief program officer for a nonprofit called Learning Economy, learningeconomy.io, and yeah, have been tied into this group for many years and appreciate being able to help out. So excited for the event and excited to share some hopeful wisdom from years past as far as presenting.
Excellent. Thank you, Taylor. Just a reminder, if you have an active mic, go ahead and you can mute yourself. If you're not sure how, I'll ask Laura to type that into the chat if you're not sure. Thank you. Taylor, I'm going to have you keep going.
Cool. Yeah. So in the spirit of sort of demonstrating some good practice as far as delivery, just wanted to lay out upfront some goals that we hope to sort of cover. And as Katie said, I think a lot of this applies to other session types beyond the one we're focused on. But this is what we hope to sort of accomplish, just discussing some considerations for designing and delivering an effective presentation, some considerations around what technology, how to integrate interactivity and allow everyone to feel like they're a part of the session, and then some other just creative ways of engaging the audience. The importance of reflection, that's the piece that's probably unique to this session type, but we'll discuss a little bit just the importance of allowing time for reflection and really bringing relevance to the individual. And then other considerations around addressing virtual audiences. So a number of these sessions will have both the on-site physical audience, but also potentially a virtual audience. So means of ensuring that they're also tied into the session.
All right, so let's dive into what the session is. So this session is unique because the present and reflect sessions they're 30 minutes of presentation, and that's to share all of the information like you would in a normal presentation. But these are followed by 5 minutes of quiet individual reflection for the group of people to be able to sit down and kind of mull over what it is that you've said, and align that with what their questions are and do all of that. But then the session ends with 10 minutes of QA for group discussion. This is going to be the audience expectation, so just keep that in mind. If you desire, or if it is helpful, things like a 5-minute timer might be helpful for that 5-minute individual reflection time. And during the reflection, you might think about like providing questions and also like integrating like what that'll look like through the whole process. So and so the reason that this is kind of structured this way is because we want time for reflection on what's been presented to improve the retention and transference for your attendees. We want to encourage, like, have a set place where they can participate, and also so it's not talking and then a next session of just talking and then a next session of just talking. Some of this is to avoid conference fatigue and, you know, to also create more of an inclusive environment for cognitive processing and those kinds of things as well.
All right, so I'm going to lay out some thoughts on just the planning process, which is many of you may be in that process currently, or at least have it on your sort of radar over the next month or so. And while this seems obvious, you know, it's really critical, and I think those that have presented in the past know what it feels like to put the planning in up front, and those that haven't, and we know that that feels very different. We've done a bit of planning for this session, and hopefully it feels like that was the case as we go. But just you know, the importance can't be sort of overstated in putting time into the planning. So you know, even if you're a great speaker and have a lot of experience, I think putting the time in up front just ensures that there's relevance and that the audience feels like you've sort of respected their time that they've invested in you. So, you know, I love recycling presentations and sort of adapting and adopting and all the things I think as education professionals we know is valuable. But one other key consideration in planning is, yes, sort of recycle and adapt previous presentations you may have used, or in the best case scenario, perhaps you're presenting something entirely new, which is a great learning experience along the way. But if you are sort of recycling or reusing or adapting, just ensure that it's, you know, focused and you plan for it to be relevant for both this session type as well as you know, the abstract you laid out, as well as OLC. So planning has to go into ensuring that that's all aligned, and I think we all know that helps. And sort of shooting from the hip, while can be exhilarating, often doesn't end with the best sort of final product. So if you want to jump to the next slide, Tina. So yeah, when it comes to sort of the things worth planning around your presentation, I think this is sort of the core 4 pieces to really focus in on. The content, that obviously is critical to align again to your audience and ensure that you're meeting expectations. So you know, often we sort of submit abstracts months in advance, and then our sort of mental lens on what our presentation can ultimately be sort of shifts up until the point of actually presenting. But just know that with that disconnect, you know, it's often very clear that the planning that went in early and the abstract that was submitted isn't necessarily being reflected in the actual session. So audiences come with an expectation based on the small bit of information they have from the program, and so aligning really well to that abstract and to what you submitted is really critical. Engagement. So you know, the more engagement, the better. Typically, in I think our minds, ensuring that the entire sort of group that's a part of it feels like they are along for the ride with you in this process, and it's not just, as much as this session is probably going to feel a little one-to-many, but that's just based on the format. Certainly, you know, at the conference, building in as much engagement as possible. And then timing, ensuring this I think comes back again to respect. So as Keegan mentioned, perhaps utilizing an actual timer of sorts to ensure that you're sort of maintaining time allotted to the 30 minutes, then the 5 of reflection, and then the 10 for the Q&A. Again, not having to be super prescriptive, but ensuring you're roughly staying to that time frame, and having a strategy. Again, this comes back to planning, but just having a strategy to ensure that happens. And then avoiding planning for the unexpected. We all can build in contingency plans for what will be the inevitable unexpected, whether it's a tech meltdown, a MacBook lighting on fire. I have actually seen it, not fire, but some smoke. You know, flash drives breaking on the trip over that has your one and only presentation. All of these things can obviously happen. So ensuring you maybe have someone in support that has a backup laptop, or making sure you have a couple cloud-based versions of your presentation if you have to turn to that. Having extra backup dongles and power cables and all the things might be useful. So just thinking about minimizing the potential for catastrophe is a huge part of the planning process. And just mapping your action plan so that you feel comfortable even if something does go wrong. So I think that's probably it. Yeah, we'll go over just some quick highlights. Again, this ties into presentation planning, but also will sort of tie into us discussing, sort of on-site presentation. But starting with a hook, planning some very tangible means of sort of connecting with your audience, planning for the reason for your audience to care, right? Making sure that it's clear that you've sort of respected them investing time, and so making it clear up front why they should care about this topic. Keeping everything simple, not trying to overplan, which can also cause problems. And again, aligning to the presentation that you submitted. Again, that's just an expectation that the audience is going to have. And then as often as possible, trying to describe content and be engaging and sort of, again, create an enjoyable process that everybody's along for, as opposed to just sitting and reading slides. We've all been a part of those presentations, and while some of the content can be absolutely captivating, I think it's best to allow everyone to be part of that process, and I think this session type allows for that. So I think that's it. We'll turn it over to Tina to talk about. We'll move from planning to actual delivery here.
Well, thanks. So you submitted this amazing proposal. The proposal was accepted. You were cheering and screaming because you get to go to Chicago. And then and you plan these great slides, which Keegan is going to be talking about in a minute. And then you get to your session and you're like, and whether you're deer in headlights, if you don't know, you're shocked to be there, and you haven't thought about that delivery piece. And so so the planning piece is critical, but so is that delivery. And so a couple of things to think about. Some of our Accelerate colleagues use the term stage presence, and what will yours be? Will you consider how you'll seem to the audience? Will you come across as nervous, friendly, curious, knowledgeable? Would you have a smile on your face? Some of those key things. Consider how you'll hook them. Taylor talked about the importance of bringing them in. What will that be for you? How will you get them connected to your topic immediately? What story will you tell right away? And consider how you're going to facilitate your session so that you start on time and that you end on time, and that you honor people's their own time, that they showed up on time to your session, that you're going to give them that gift back of ending on time. Keegan's going to talk through some of the key slide design strategies, but just a couple of tips when you think about your delivery. Those things that when we walk into a conference room might make us nervous. We may not know what the setup's going to be like. We may not know how the tables will be laid out. We may not know just exactly what could go wrong. So think about how you can strategize to address those before your session. Consider when you arrive in Chicago, can you go to the room that you're assigned to, plug in your computer, make sure everything works. The rooms are typically open and set up for that you can see how the tables are laid out depending on how you want to do that Q&A or that kind of audience engagement piece. So be kind to yourself by planning ahead so that you maybe don't have surprises when you show up at the moment for your session. Okay, so, sorry. I apologize. One other addition I should say is that Presenter Services has an amazing set of guides that they have created. Laura will be sharing a variety of those throughout the chat window. So even if you don't have time this moment to take a peek at those, definitely grab those URLs and save them for later so that you can peruse those at your own time. So when we talk about presentations, it's easy to give a good presentation, but think about how you might give a good one. So if we do a search, many of us have probably searched for how to give a good presentation. We see things like start and end on time, speak clearly, make eye contact. Those are probably a lot of the ones that we've learned in Speech 101 throughout college or wherever we might have had a speech class. But I wanted to give you a couple of tips that might take your presentation from good to great. So the first tip is don't just give a presentation, create a conversation. Be sure to connect with your audience by telling the story. Make them feel like they're a part of the session. Excuse me. One of the best ways to make an audience feel like they're part of the session is that if you have time, and again, if you've prepared ahead and you're not scrambling at the front to try and get your presentation ready, is to stand at the door and greet people as they come in. Excuse me one second. My apologies. If you have time, shake hands, ask their name, where they're from. It depends on how many people are coming through the door, but having that smiling, warm face will welcome them, and it will also likely help you feel at ease. You're not kind of panicking about the session that's to come. It also makes a personal human connection to your audience that can really help the overall feel of your session feel more dynamic. Another tip is use the space. A lot of us have maybe been in college classes or at other lectures or seminars where the person stands very tightly behind the lectern. Don't feel like you're confined to that space. Certainly feel free to use the space and wander. Sometimes presenting from the back of the room, however that's defined, can have a really powerful impact and influence on the experience. We'll talk more about the virtual audience pieces later, but if you decide to leave the lectern, make sure that you have a mic or a lapel mic at some point, and we'll talk more about why that is. Another tip, optimizing the learning, taking it from presentation to conversation. Rather than saying, this is what we did, turn it to, this is what I learned, and this is what it might mean for you at your institution, and allow the attendee to take that information and apply it to their own situation. Another one, make sure that your presentation is accessible. That goes down to ensuring that your materials are accessible, and also ensuring that whatever activities you've planned for, that they're accessible. So if you want to have people get up and move around, is the room really tight and confined because there's so many people that might not be possible, and how can you adjust on the fly to address that situation? Or if you need people to hang something on the wall, if somebody cannot do that, what would be another option? Or could you have like table buddies and to help people do those kinds of things? So really think about ensuring things are accessible and compliant. Again, our presenter services team has done an amazing job to create guides and resources to help you. So be sure to check those out. Laura will be posting those as you can, in the chat as you see them. And finally, be passionate. You submitted your session proposal. It was accepted. I know, again, you had that yay, that big cheer that maybe you tweeted out that you're accepted. So bring that passion into your session. You don't have to be silly. You don't have to tell silly jokes. You can, but don't feel pressured to do that. But just be you and let your enthusiasm for the topic and what you came to present on show through. And I guarantee that confidence will show through to the session and ensure that it's again, a more enjoyable presentation for everybody.
All right, let's dive into some slide design. So like just at the very beginning, when you're thinking about your slides, you want to think about, how can they be a way to enhance your message? You want to, avoid anything that will be distracting to the audience. Sometimes poor slide design can be that. So we'll review my favorite example in just a sec, but also think about, if you're going to have folks link out to a resource such as like a bit.ly link or a tiny URL, something like that, having those links throughout the presentation rather than just at the very beginning in case somebody comes in a couple minutes late. Those are some of the things to consider as you're thinking about your slide design. So my absolute favorite example, this slide is an example of using way too much text, and too much text is not helpful. It is overwhelming, because it's just, for me, it's even where like sometimes when I'll see too much on a slide, like it's easier just to check out from like in that very moment, just because like wrestling with the concepts from the previous slide and anything else that I'm thinking about at the time. But also for us, like this is really a accessibility concern too, because even whether it's folks in the room itself that wouldn't be able to see the small text at the back, or whether it's situations where you're streaming your text online and even then it's too small, avoid too much text on your slides. So how should we think about text? Well, less is always more. It's always going to be more. If you've had maybe you've had assignments where your students have to distill a whole bunch of information down to a single GIF or the text of a tweet. It takes a lot to craft and construct those complex ideas down into the very consumable. And that's something that you'll need to think about as you are going about designing your slides, to make all of that text into less is more. Of course, you'll want to be consistent in your font usage. We recommend a minimum of 30-point font, and you're going to want to use your styles strategically. So I wouldn't recommend the bold, underline, italics, like that kind of thing that sometimes I've seen in faculty syllabus, for every single line of important thing, which then appears to be every single line of the syllabus. So just think through how that's going to look for your presentation, and maybe even get some feedback from some of your peers. Now for graphics, just quickly, I think the main thing about graphics is, think about how they best communicate your message. A beautiful graphic is one thing, but something that's intended to connect to your content, something that kind of, takes your theme further, like that's going to be additive. That's going to enhance the experience and the content for your attendees, the folks in the room. And then, lastly, like if you want to review some design principles and stuff, you can look through the contrast, repetition, alignment, and proximity, which is the CRAP, if you so desire to, look into that more as you are putting your pictures, your graphics with your text and all of your slides as that construction process is taking place.
Okay, so the question sometimes comes up, what should I bring? Do I need to bring handouts, takeaways, all of these kinds of things? So let's just quickly talk about a couple of things. All presenters should absolutely upload their presentation slides, handouts, whatever content or important critical resources, materials that are either enhanced or are the primary resource for your presentation should be uploaded to the OLC conference management site. And again, our presenter resources team can help you do that if you're not sure where that is. And if you use a Google slide or a Google site or a GitHub or a WordPress site, just simply paste that link into a document and upload that document. That helps our colleagues who attend our sessions to have easy access after the fact. So consider that when many of us travel, some people choose not to check bags or they have limited space. And so that the same goes through with these handouts, is that sometimes taking all of this stuff back with us can sometimes be more of a hassle. So that's just one consideration. And also remember that our attendees are attending many, many sessions throughout the week. And so typically when we get back to our workplaces, we're like, oh yeah, that one session was really good. And you go back and you look for those materials or those handouts, and it helps kind of jog the information, and then also start thinking about how you're going to reflect and connect again that information back to your own world at the place that you work. And again, another reminder just to upload those slides and handouts. Certainly Laura can post that into the chat on where to do that. And then always ensuring your materials are accessible. We talked about this earlier, and again, Presenter Services has some good resources on that. Finally, giveaways or any kind of prizes, for example. So I've seen presenters bring candy and they lay it out on the table. Some presenters bring nothing, and that's okay. Some presenters bring a couple of pieces of college swag, and they might hand it out to the first person that arrived, the first person that shared a scenario or a something. I present sessions on imposter phenomenon. I always bring something that connects to that. I can't tell you what it's going to be this time, but it's just something, it's like a thing that I choose to do. So every presenter has their own way of doing things. But again, remember, people are traveling. And so typically if you're going to bring something small or something edible is fine. But otherwise, there's no pressure to do giveaways or any kind of takeaway from a session. It's not required, and it's certainly not an expectation of you.
All right, so let's just, touch base on some of the virtual audience and what some of that'll be like too. The first thing that, we need to think about as we're engaging our virtual participants is, what does inclusivity look like for that group of people? I think in particular, right, you want to pause specifically to engage those virtual audiences, just like you would with your face-to-face. So, during the Q&A, making it a point to maybe even asking that group first of their questions and their information before continuing to the people in the room. The other thing that you'll want to consider too, related to that, is, you know, if when the questions do come in, you want to repeat those into your microphone so that people in the virtual audience can also hear those as they come through. So for accessibility, Tina talked about, you know, posting your materials beforehand. I think that's one of the easiest ways, you know, getting folks the information beforehand, making those things available in the moment as well. Those things are going to help, you know, giving text documents, if you're doing kind of worksheet or form kinds of things, any of that stuff, you'll want to think about how you might distribute those contents as well to a virtual audience. And then, you know, as you're like kind of thinking through, you know, what the virtual kind of experience is going to be, you know, my favorite experience that I had in the past, like we had it where our presenter, like he was doing those pauses to engage the virtual audience. But the other thing that was happening at the time is there was a virtual co-presenter in the space of the virtual audience. So it was really interesting because somebody connected to the presenter that had registered for the virtual conference was also like a somebody that was planted there to also kind of help with that engagement and help with, you know, that discussion and what that kind of looked like. So that was a very positive experience at a previous OLC conference that I've attended. But, you know, just think through what kind of strategies you want to employ, whether you want to something like that, or maybe something like a Google Doc, whatever it is that, you know, can make your session be somewhat comparable to the experience of attending in person. And then just a side note, that icon on the screen, the streamed session, that's the icon that'll be next to all of the sessions that are streamed session in the program itself. Now, so a little bit about the streaming setup. So only your voice and presentation are going to be live. So there's not going to be a camera that's like in this image. It's not going to be set up like that. It's just going to be your microphone and your slides. So plan around that. You know, your mic is also going to be live at all times. So during that, you know, 5-minute kind of break time, just be aware of conversations that are going on at that particular time. The other thing though that, you know, we want to bring to light is the session chair, which is the person that is going to be like the who is like the kind of the go-between, I would say, between you and the virtual audience. Like they kind of, you know, they are interacting directly with that virtual audience. Communicate with them, because that's going to be the person that's going to interact with those people. So if you have things like links that you want to share out in the session that you also want the virtual folks to see, or maybe if you have more materials for the virtual folks to see in place of some of the presentation experience or any of those kinds of things, interacting with that session chair, that person that is going to manage your virtual experience, is going to be a good way to go, a positive way. When you're, yeah, we'll go to the next one. When you're thinking about some of the other ways you can, you know, engage your virtual audience. So these are some of the tools that we've seen in the past, whether it's Google Slides, Kahoot, Poll Everywhere, those kinds of tools. They are things, you know, that can provide connective tissue between your virtual audience and your on-ground audience. They are things that allow you to also give some, you know, whether you want to do quizzes and polling, but also give say in terms of a Google Doc situation where folks can share their own musings and thoughts with the group in kind of a written way, if spoken is not necessarily as easy. But you know, these aren't, this isn't an exhaustive list. This is just a few that that we've seen in the past. So if you have something, if you have like a website or a form or something that you think would be a engagement piece for the on-site, online, whatever you can kind of imagine, think through some of those. We just wanted to provide a few examples as you're getting ready and planning your presentation. All right, let's jump to the next one. Yeah, so all right. So while you're thinking about all of this, so we've gone through the planning, we've gone through the actual delivery and the slides, and if you have virtual audience, we've talked through some of those things. So while you're thinking about all of that, while you're thinking about the tools you use, just be sure to consider, who is going to be involved in as your attendees. Like, think about the audience and how, where are they going to come from? Maybe based on your content, like, do you anticipate having K-12 folks present? Do you anticipate more instructional designers? That's not necessarily going to guarantee your audience, but think through those kinds of things, because that's going to affect how you include the audience in terms of maybe your questioning and your tools. One thing too is, be aware that your audience is going to bring its own experience to the room. So like, if you are developing questions and doing different kinds of things, maybe you have questions that are just for videographers or IDs or faculty or different kinds of pieces. Like, think about your wording and maybe even how some of those different questions might link together. Those things are some excellent possibilities that you have access to. Capitalize on that diversity of experience in your room. Ask them to share their ideas and insights. And this is going to provide you with a richer learning experience for everyone in the room.
And if can I jump in real quick too? I was going to mention, when it comes to engagement, I mean, I think some of the most successful sessions I've been a part of, I don't know that I myself have done this very successfully, but I think those that really try to, and this comes back to sort of not just recycling and sort of plugging and playing with existing presentations that you've used in the past and just sort of inserting it into OLC. And the strategy is to really try to integrate your presentation into the broader sort of community and conference as a whole. So that might involve, referencing other sessions. Some of this has to be sort of done a little more fluidly and dynamically because some of this can unfold as your experience unfolds in Chicago. But I think just means of, making it clear that your session is part of the greater sort of experience that's unfolding, and not having it feel like sort of a one-off session that's existing in this silo. So again, that strategies to get there can be really varied, but I think it's something to at least think about. How does your session sort of connect to the broader experience that everybody, it's the one thing we know everyone's going to share, is that we're all either virtually or physically at OLC Innovate. And so that's sort of a baseline we can all tie into. So what are the themes, whether that's incorporating, the bridge, the sort of bridges theme that's going to be present, or other sort of, interesting conversations that sort of lead up, whether that's online or elsewhere. Anyway, so yeah, wanted to that's just some of the sessions that stick in my mind and are most memorable and most impactful, seem to sort of feel integrated into the broader experience that everybody's sharing. So I think with that in mind, we wanted to, again, sort of stay true to at least this session type and give everybody probably not 5 minutes, but maybe one quick minute to just sort of sit with your thoughts and reflect a little bit. All right, maybe that's, yeah, good indicator. Obviously, we can keep moving. We've got more to cover. So
at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Katie Schuster and Laura Widener for some more information about OLC and the session type in general.
Thanks, Tina. We wanted to go over some of those really important presenter logistics pieces that we get a lot of questions on typically. So you may hear a few things that have already been touched on previously, but that is just so that we can stress how important these pieces are. So first of all, the technology that's provided in the room, there will be a podium at the front of the room, and it will have an HDMI connection. So please make sure that if your laptop or your device doesn't have an HDMI connection, that you bring a dongle or an adapter so that you can plug into that HDMI connection. The presenter screens, those presentation screens, will be set up to accommodate the 16:9 widescreen that is mostly standard these days format. Of course, the screens will accommodate a 4:3 format as well. However, you'll get a lot of space on the side, some valuable presentation real estate that you're not using. So we do recommend that you set those presentations up in that 16:9 format. There is, if your presentation is designated as one of the streaming presentations, we highly recommend that you also have your session chair, they'll be using a chat function. So we use MediaSite as our streaming partner, and we have a chat widget in that streaming setup. So that is how the session chair in your room, again, this is only for those streaming presentations, and you can look at the program listing to find out if your session is streaming or not. But they'll be interacting with the virtual participants through that chat widget. So just so you know how that interaction will be. And again, it's really helpful if you can touch base with your session chair before your session starts. They usually try to show up hopefully a couple minutes early, but they can sometimes be running from session to session just like you are. And especially if you have URLs or anything that you want shared out to that virtual audience, it's important to touch base with them. So let's see. Also, you can share a tiny URL or a bit.ly link or something as part of your slide deck. I've seen people put it in the footers of their templates so that people have easy access to those presentation materials. The other thing is I just want to also stress how important it is to upload those materials to the conference system so that people have access to that information as well. Okay, I think there will be wireless internet in the conference space. There's also a hardwired connection at the podium. So, you know, while we certainly never expect an issue with the internet, it is always best to make sure that you have some type of backup plan in case there is an internet issue. It is a third-party provided internet service that we contract for through the hotel. So, and while we certainly work closely with them, sometimes things happen. So we encourage you to plan for an interruption to the internet. Even though we never anticipate that, it's just something to have as a backup plan. If you need any AV or IT assistance, there is a hallway monitor assigned to every couple of rooms. I think each hallway monitor has 3 or 4 rooms that they're assigned to, and you can poke your head out your door and grab your hallway monitor, and who will know how to get in touch with either an AV, IT assistant, or can get in touch directly with me, and then I can put a call out to send someone to your room to assist you. So there are people there who are there to help you in case you need any assistance with the technology. All right, next slide, please, Tina. Thank you. So the rooms are primarily set up in round tables. There might be a couple of rooms where the rooms are a little bit smaller, and so we have more theater style seating, but primarily you can expect a round table, more conversational setup for those, for your attendees. As I mentioned, there's a podium, there'll be a head table for 3. There will be a mic or 2 there. So again, I want to stress how important it is for you to use that mic during your presentation, whether your session is streaming or not. It is really important for accessibility reasons that you use that mic for your presentation, and then also to repeat any questions that the audience may have asked so that everyone can hear and understand what's going on in the room. You know, sometimes there's a handheld mic that you can maybe pass around during question time, but you know, again, it's just really, really important. As somebody in the chat said previously, your teacher voice isn't going to be enough, and it's really important to use that mic and make sure you repeat any questions, and then also answer those questions with the mic. And again, there's another reminder, this is how important it is to either upload or link your slides or handouts to the conference management system. And the next slide actually has instructions on how to do that. So basically you would need to log in to your OLC user account, and then on the left-hand menu, you would select conference profile, which would then redirect you to the conference management system. Once you're there, you select My Sessions in the upper right-hand corner, and then click the edit link, and then upload your files or paste in your URL. Then you always want to make sure you scroll down and click Save. So that, and Laura actually put together a great helpful video that you can find on the Presenter Services webpage to help you upload your materials as well. All right, so, and then the next slide, this is also encourage your attendees to fill out your session evaluations. So we know that you want feedback on your presentation, and we want you to encourage people to submit those session evaluations. There is actually a contest that we always host for people who submit session evaluations. So we randomly select 5 winners who receive $25 gift cards, but there's also a contest for presenters. If you're in the, you know, in the list of the presenters with the most session evaluations submitted, there's a drawing also for a gift card, an OLC gift card. So that is, we encourage you to place the slide that you can download from the Presenter Services webpage, or the presenter FAQ at the beginning and at the end of your slide deck, so that you remind your attendees to fill out that evaluation. All right, and now I'm going to turn things over to Laura to talk a little bit more about our coaching opportunities.
Sorry, typing and couldn't reach my mute button, and I'll go now. So we wanted to encourage everybody to think about reaching out for coaching. This is one of the wonderful added services that OLC offers all of their presenters. We have a lineup of about 8 different experienced presenters who are ready to help you kind of go through your presentation. They can give you feedback on the slides themselves, guidance on how you can improve things. You can go through and run a practice with them on your slides, and they're just there to generally support you in the development and presentation process. So I encourage you to go ahead and go to the Presenter Services website, which we've posted many times, sign up for coaching, and we will get you connected almost immediately with a coach to start kind of working through the things that are available to you. So super excited that everybody joined us today. Know that this, you know, is because you have questions about what you can do to make your presentation better, and that coaching service can really help you get there. So at this point, we're just kind of open for questions for any of the presenters. If you have any more, you can turn your mic on or post in the chat, whatever you're most comfortable with, and we'll just kind of hang out for a few minutes and see if anybody has any more questions. Thank you so much for coming.
I have a question.
Go for it.
And just to clarify, because I heard two different things. One was to bring your own microphone, or that the last couple slides said there would be microphones in the room.
Thanks for clarifying that. Yes, there are microphones in the room. Not every space is going to have a lapel mic. So if you're really particular about how you want to move around, you might bring one with you, but you definitely will have microphones in the larger spaces. Thank you, Christine. Some of the super small spaces may not have. That's a good point.
That sounds great. I'm not that particular. Thank you.
I just want to jump in. There were a couple of comments and questions earlier in the chat, and just in case anyone missed those, it was about how is that reflection time defined? What can you do as a presenter in that time? And both Taylor and I responded, and I think a couple of others, that it's not defined. It's how you choose to design that time, and what you think the biggest value of the reflection. So could you provide a couple of prompts for people to think about? Yes. Could you have people think, pair, share, like think, turn to a colleague and share something back? Yes. So how you design that time is completely up to you and how it fits your session.
Yeah, getting to the point of being able to think about the way we're thinking, I think that's like the overarching, let's try to get to that sort of space. How we get there, yeah, the sky's the limit.
Are there other questions that folks have, or if you'd like to post something in the chat instead, we're here to help answer any of those.
If your session is a streaming session, are you sharing your computer screen or the specific program you have open? So if you're toggling between two programs, will they see that toggle?
Okay. I might have to have other people. I believe so. I think you'd want to share your screen, because whatever you want the virtual audience to see, you'd want to set that so that your screen is showed, not a particular application. So not just PowerPoint, for example, because if the other piece is a relevant element of your content for your presentation, they should see that.
Okay, so we have control of that within, as we get our presentation set up beforehand with our session chair.
Yep. And Christine Hinckley just chimed in, it shares your screen, which is what you would want it to do, right?
Okay,
and
perfect.
certainly the AV people that are on site can help with that. One other piece I wanted to share just about if you were in a streaming session is if you have something that is visual to the people in the room. So let's just say that I decide to bring this Starbucks cup and I'm going to talk about it. If the virtual audience cannot see this, because remember there's no camera on me as the presenter, I would have to describe what I'm holding, or I would have to describe what I'm doing. So just remember that there's a visual element that is not conveyed in a streaming presentation, you know, given that there's no camera.
And
I would put it.
Oh. Go ahead, Keegan.
All I was going to say, or, you know, maybe in that situation, you can put something in your slide as well, you know.
Yep, planning ahead for that. Perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Taylor?
I was gonna just reiterate, you know, making use of session chairs. I mean, you know, there's gonna be some real experts that have a lot of experience, and I think it's a group of folks that often get underutilized at all conferences, but certainly knowing those that will be in support of each session, like lean into those folks. They'll be there to support. So.
Any other questions or comments or anything else we can help you with today? Thanks, and Christine is mentioning that they'll emphasize in session chair training to help them visualize in words to things like to the attendees if that's needed. So our session chairs are amazing. They really are a key part of those streaming sessions.
I have a quick question about, you had mentioned something before about going in and checking out our space. When will we have access to be able to go and check that out? And how, if we wanted tables and stuff arranged a certain way, but there's going to be people in there before us, how does that work?
So typically tables the rooms are set as they're set. So unless Christine tells me something different, in the chat, but she says you can get in there typically 15 minutes prior to your session. Now, when I arrive to a conference early, I typically am, just like when I was in high school, I went to find all my classrooms early so I'd know where to go. I typically try to do that. And if the room is open, you can peek your head in and see what the room is set up like. But otherwise it is 15 minutes before session. And yes, you cannot move the furniture. There's typically not enough time to do that. So I don't know if that answers your question. Often it is possible to peek into the room though before like the night before the conference starts. Excuse me. And if you're not sure or you want it, like just do a wander and see if you can even just open the door and peek in. Sometimes they are unlocked and open for you.
I've done it right before and after lunch too.
It's a good idea, Keegan. I also mentioned in the chat, if you do need a room to practice in, we do have open meeting rooms that you can reserve. So if you want to stop by the conference registration desk and reserve an open meeting room for a half an hour, whatever, they can see what rooms would be available for you if you wanted to practice with the technology setup. Now, it wouldn't be the same room where your presentation would be, but it would have the be available for you to kind of do a dry run.
And this, oh, go ahead, Taylor, please.
I was gonna say this might be option overload at this point, but and a shameless plug, but the field guide station, which will be right by registration, feel free at any point to come by. The folks there will likely have a good sense of the space and can, kind of help you navigate and find your room. So field guide station's a good spot to just get some support too.
And I certainly encourage you, like what Tina said, talking to your audience as they're walking in the door. If you have a plan and you want them in small groups or you want them all in the front room of the room, just tell them as they come in, please make sure you sit at the front of the room. We're going to do some group exercises, that kind of thing.
Great. Thanks, Laura. Other questions or information that you might need answered or provided?
I'm going to go ahead and turn off the recording, but if people have questions, we still have a couple of minutes before the top of the hour. But thank you all for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing all of you in Chicago in a few short weeks. But again, we'll hang out for another couple of minutes if people think of new questions.
Thanks, everybody.